Hello dear students, in this video we are going to study the text of Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard poem composed by Thomas Gray, and this is part 2 of this text. And on your screen you can see the text of Thomas Gray's poem Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. So the opening stanza lines are: for them no more the blazing hearths shall burn, or busy housewife play her evening care. No children run to lisp their shears return, or climb his knees the envied kiss to share. In this stanza, Thomas Gray is listing some day to day pleasures that were earlier experienced by the rude forefathers that are laid now in the grave. So he is saying that for them no more the blazing hearths shall burn. Now, as the forefathers, as the ancestors are sleeping in their grave, so now there will no more burning of the hearth, or no busy housewife will be there to care the evening activities. No children run to lisp their shears return, or climb his knees the envied kiss to share. Now the poet is mentioning that were earlier experienced by the forefathers. So in the series of these, as they are sleeping in their grave, there will no running of the children, as they were earlier uh, at the return of their father. The children would run, and would speak in their child's speech at their father's return, or climb his knees to envy their siblings. So, in this stanza, Thomas Gray is mentioning some of the activities that would no longer be felt by the ancestors sleeping in the grave. In next stanza, the opening lines of this stanza is: off did the harvest to their sickle yield, the furrow of the stubborn glebe has broke. How jocund did they drive their team afield? How bowed the woods beneath their sturdy stroke. In this stanza, Thomas Gray is describing the farmer's activities like plowing the field, or returning at the returning the home at evening, or cheerfully driving the team of oxen to the field, and clearing the forests to make their fields. So in these lines the poet is saying that often did the harvest to their sickle yield. When the people were alive, when the forefathers were alive, they would harvest they would harvest the crop by their sickle. And in the next line he is saying that their furrow of the stubborn glebe has broke, and they would plow the field. Furrow means plowing the field or breaking the ground. And here the poet is using a word, stubborn glebe. Why he is using the word? Because he is saying that the land is so hard. Glebe means land or soil. So he is saying that the land is so hard that the farmers were used to plow the field. How jocund did they drive their team afield. Now he is mentioning the pleasure that were experienced by the forefathers, and he is saying that they, with the team of their oxen or the mules, they drove the oxen or the mules cheerfully to the field to start their day. How bowed the woods beneath their sturdy stalks. Sturdy stalks means the strong stalks of axes on the woods. Now he is mentioning that how the farmers would clear the forest to make their field, to make their um, farmland, and he is saying that with the strong blow of axes. Here he is imagining a picture. He is saying that with the strong blow of the axes, the woods means the forest or the trees bowed in respect beneath to the ground towards the farmers. So in these four lines in this stanza, the poet is describing the farmers' day-to-day activities in their fields. Let not ambition mock their useful toil, their homely joys and destiny obscure, nor grandeur here with a disdainful smile, the short and simple annals of the poor. In this stanza, the poet is using a device in figures of speech. He is using personification in line number 1 in in the word ambition. He has personified ambition here, and in line 3rd he has personified grandeur. He is saying that let not ambition mock their useful toil, their homely joys and destiny obscure. Now, in this stanza, the poet is indicating the readers that those who are ambitious, now he is signing towards the ambitious people, and he is advising the readers that that you should not allow ambition to mock their useful toil. Their word is used here for the forefathers, for the rude forefather, for the countryside folk. Let not ambition mock their useful toil, their homely joys and destiny obscure. Destiny obscure means here the poet is clarifying that the destiny of these Hamlet people are very obscure. Their destiny is not so uh, wealthy or prosperous or full of meaning. So he is saying that we should not allow ambition to mock the forefathers' useful business of farming and their homely joys and destiny obscure. So he is suggesting the readers that you should not mock, you should not make fun of these people's hard work, their homely joys, their simple pleasures, and their obscure destiny. In the next lines, he is using personification for grandeur, and he is saying, nor grandeur here with a disdainful smile, the short and simple annals of the poor. Here he is saying that not you should, he is directly addressing the readers that not grandeur mock the peoples, the folk, the countryside folk, nor grandeur here with a disdainful smile, the short and simple annals of the poor. He is saying that nor grandeur should hear the people's accounts, the simple and short accounts, the simple and short history of these poor people with the disdainful smile, with the scornful smile, with the proudful smile. Grandeur here describes high social status. So he is saying that the people who have high social status, they should not make fun of these rude father, and they should not hear the historical events of these forefathers with a disdainful smile, with a scornful smile. So here he has used personification in ambition. He has personified ambition and grandeur in this stanza. The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth ever gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The path of glory lead but to the grave. This stanza is very famous for the line, "The paths of glory lead but to the grave." This is a universal truth mentioned here by Thomas Gray. He is saying that the boast of heraldry means the ancestral grandeur or prosperity experienced by the aristocratic families. He is comparing here the aristocratic rituals, the aristocratic pomp and prosperity, wealth and grandeur, to the poor people's simple and short life of the poor people. Here he is saying that the boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth ever gave awaits alike the inevitable hour. The inevitable hour means death. He is saying that all these things, that like the boast of grandeur, the pomp of power, and all that beauty that were proudly acquired by the aristocratic families, all these things, all that wealth, all that beauty, all that heraldry, all that pomp, they will awaits alike the inevitable hour. He is sharing with us an universal truth. He is saying that all these things will be destroyed by the inevitable hour, by the death. The path of glory lead but to the grave. And here he, in this line, he is displaying the gist of these the above three lines, and he is saying the paths of glory lead but to the grave means all these things, all these pomp and show, all these beauty, all these prosperity, grandeur, and the ambition, the proud, all these things will lead the path to grave means all these things one day, uh, these these things are all mortals, and one day this all these things will be merged with the path to the grave. Nor you, ye proud, impute to these the fault, if memory over their tomb no trophies raise, where through the long drawn easel and freighted vault the pealing anthem swells the note of praise. Now, in this stanza, again he is personifying proud and memory. He is saying that, nor you, ye proud. Here he is directly addressing proud, and he is saying, oh proud, you should not blame, you should not denounce the fault of the forefathers, of the ancestors that are buried in the grave. For what they are blaming? That if memory over their tomb no trophies raise. He is saying that if there is no memorial accounts, no memorial trophies on the tomb of the rude forefathers, if there is no epitaph, if there is no tombstone graved on the uh, graves of the forefathers, you proud people, you should not blame the fault of these forefathers, because their family are not so rich to engrave some grandeur, some prosperous epitaph, some prosperous trophies on the grave of their ancestors. Now, in the next two lines, where through the long drawn easel and freighted vault, the pealing anthem swells the note of praise. In these two lines, the poet is mentioning the church wherein the speaker, wherein the poet is sitting. He is saying that the tombstones and the tomb are placed in where the tomb is placed, the tombs of the forefathers are placed here, where through the long drawn is and freighted fold. He is mentioning the he is mentioning the corridor of the church. That long drawn easel means the corridor of the church, and the freighted vault. Here he is mentioning arched the carved arch of the church. In the next line, he is saying the pealing anthem swells the note of praise. When there is the engravement of any dead people, the ringing or the jingling of the anthems or the jingling of the notes of praise. Here in the church, the poet again mentioning the ringing or the jingling of the notes of praise while at the time of burial of any dead person. So in this line, the poet is mentioning about the rude forefathers buried there in the grave. He is saying that the proud should not blame the fault of not engraving any epitaph on the tombs of these poor forefathers. Now let's move to the next stanza. Can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? Can honor's voice provoke the silent dust, or flattery soothe the dull cold ear of death? Here I would like to explain that in this stanza the poet is using a device, a figures of speech that is rhetorical question. So first of all we would know about what is a rhetorical question. So a rhetorical question is a persuasive one. It's not meant to get an answer per se. It's meant to get the listener or the reader to think a certain way, to come around to a certain point of view, or to arrive at a certain conclusion. A rhetorical question often does have an answer, or at least an answer that the asker believes in. So, here in this stanza, the poet is using a pair of rhetorical question. In line number 1 of this stanza, he is asking the reader that can storied urn means the vessel in which the remains of dead person is stored. So he is saying that can storied urn or animated bust means the statue of head and shoulder part of any dead person. So he is saying that can a storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion called the fleeting breath? He is asking that can all these pompous things like the storied urn, the engraved urn, or the animated bust, or the statue of head and shoulder part of any dead person, can these things call the breathe back to the dead body? And here in the second line he is using a metaphor. He is calling the dead body a mansion. So he is saying that can all these things, um, can these urn, engraved urn, or the animated bust, can these things call back the breath to the dead person? In next lines, can honor's voice provoke the silent dust, or flattery soothe the dull cold ear of death? Now again he is saying, he is personifying honor, and he is saying that can honor's voice provoke the silent dust? Silent dust means the dead person. He is saying that can honor's voice provoke the silent dust? Can the voice of honor provoke or can wake up the silent man, the dead person, or flattery soothe the dull cold ear of death, or the flattery done by the uh, people left on the land, can their flattery soothe the dull cold ear of death? Can their flattery soothe the death's cold ears. Here he is using the imagery of death, that have cold ear. Dull cold ear means there is no effect of flattery on the dead people now. So in these lines he is in a stanza, in the above stanza and in this stanza, the poet is saying some critical statements. He is displaying the universal truth before us, that all these pomp and show, all these urn or the bust, they can't ever back breathe to the dead person. No flattery, no honor can provoke them, can wake up them from their buried grave. So that's all for today. All the students, those who are listening the video, they are suggested to make a critical comment on these stanza and to analyze the lines one by one and to figure out the figures of speech in these stanzas. That's all for today. Thank you all.